The morning after my husband's funeral, I returned home to find his father moving furniture out. "This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags," he declared smugly. I watched quietly as they carried out my belongings, then calmly told him, "You forgot one crucial thing. This property reverts to blood family now. Pack your bags and get out." William's voice echoed through my living room as I stood in the doorway, still wearing my black funeral dress from yesterday. I watched in stunned silence as he directed his sons to carry out my grandmother's antique rocking chair, the one Daniel had loved sitting in while reading his evening paper. "You have no right to be here," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the chaos unfolding before me. William turned to face me, his weathered face twisted with satisfaction. "No right. This is family property, girl. Always has been, always will be. Daniel is gone now and you're not blood. Simple as that. I am Ava Morrison, 37 years old, and until yesterday I thought I understood my place in this world. For 8 years I had been married to Daniel Bennett, a gentle soul who worked as a veterinarian here in Charleston, South Carolina. We had built what I believed was a beautiful life together in the colonial house his grandfather had left him. But as I watched William's other sons, Lawrence and Benjamin, hauling my belongings toward the front door, I realized how naive I had been about his family's true feelings toward me. The morning after laying my husband to rest, I had returned home from my sister's house to find the locks changed and the Bennett men treating my home like their personal storage unit. William stood in the center of it all, orchestrating the removal of my life as if I were nothing more than a temporary tenant whose lease had expired. "Daniel wouldn't want this," I whispered, my hands trembling as I watched them stack my wedding photos carelessly on the porch. "Daniel is dead," William snapped. "And he was too soft-hearted when it came to you. We told him from the beginning you were only after the family money, but he wouldn't listen. Well, that charade is over now." The words hit me like physical blows. 8 years of family dinners where I was tolerated but never welcomed. 8 years of conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. 8 years of being treated like an outsider at my own husband's family gatherings. I had endured it all because Daniel asked me to, because he believed his family would eventually come around. Lawrence appeared beside his father, breathing heavily from moving furniture. "Most of her stuff is out, Dad. What about the kitchen things?" "Take what's valuable, leave the rest," William replied without even glancing at me. "She can have until sunset to collect whatever junk we don't want." As I stood there watching them dismantle my life, something cold settled in my chest. They had underestimated me completely, just as they always had. But what they didn't know was that Daniel had never underestimated them at all. My relationship with the Bennett family had been strained from the very beginning. When Daniel first brought me home to meet his parents 8 years ago, the reception was arctic at best. I was a nurse from a middle-class family, someone who had worked her way through community college and earned everything I had. To William and his wife, Margaret, I was clearly beneath their veterinarian son who came from 3 generations of property owners. "She's very practical," Margaret had said that first evening, her tone making it sound like a disease. I was helping clear the dinner dishes while Daniel spoke with his father about expanding the veterinary practice. "I suppose that's important in your line of work." The subtle digs continued through our courtship and into our marriage. They never missed an opportunity to mention the daughters of their friends, girls who had gone to private colleges and came from established families. When Daniel and I announced our engagement, William's first question wasn't about our happiness, but about the prenuptial agreement. "You understand, Ava, that family property has been passed down through generations," he had said during what he called our pre-wedding discussion. "The house, the land, the practice, these things stay within the bloodline. Daniel is young and romantic, but business is business." Daniel had grown uncomfortable during that conversation, shifting in his chair beside me. "Dad, we don't need to discuss this now." "Actually, we do," William continued. "Ava seems like a sensible girl. I'm sure she understands the importance of preserving family legacy." I had nodded politely, not wanting to cause problems for Daniel, but inside I was seething. The way William spoke about me, as if I were a gold digger plotting to steal their precious legacy, made my stomach turn. What they didn't realize was that I had never wanted their money or their property. I had fallen in love with Daniel because of his kindness, his dedication to healing animals, and his gentle spirit. But Daniel saw how his family treated me. He noticed the way conversations became stilted when I joined them, How holiday invitations came with subtle suggestions that I might prefer to work that day instead. He watched his mother rearrange seating at family dinners so I was always placed at the far end of the table. Most importantly, he heard the comments they made when they thought he wasn't listening. "Son, you could do so much better," Margaret had said one Sunday afternoon while I was in the kitchen. I heard every word through the thin walls. "That girl is nice enough, I suppose, but she's not our kind of people." Daniel had defended me that day, his voice firm. "Mother, Ava is exactly my kind of people. She's caring, hardworking, and she makes me happy. That should be enough." "Happiness is wonderful, dear, but compatibility matters too. Think about your children, your future. Don't you want someone who can truly be part of this family?" The conversation had ended there, but the damage was done. Daniel came into the kitchen afterward and wrapped his arms around me, apologizing for his mother's words. But I could see something shift in his eyes that day, a new understanding of just how unwelcome I would always be in his family circle. The moment that changed everything happened 3 months before Daniel died. We had attended his cousin's wedding, another Bennett family gathering where I played my usual role as the polite outsider. During the reception, I excused myself to use the restroom and returned to find the family huddled in deep conversation about estate planning. "When Daniel goes, the property comes back to the family, right?" Benjamin was asking his father. "I mean, she's not actually entitled to anything long-term, is she?" "Don't be ridiculous," William replied, his voice low but clear. "Wives get temporary rights, but family property always returns to blood. It's been that way for generations. Ava will get whatever Daniel leaves her in personal effects, but the house, the land, the practice, that all comes back where it belongs." Lawrence nodded approvingly. "Good. I was worried we might have legal complications with her involved." "The only complication," Margaret added with venom in her voice, "is getting her to leave peacefully when the time comes. You know how these types can be when money is involved." Daniel's cousin, Preston, chimed in. "Maybe she'll remarry quickly and move on. Problem solved." The casual way they discussed my future widowhood, as if Daniel's death was an inevitability they were already planning around, made my blood run cold. But what shocked me most was their complete certainty that I had no legitimate claim to the life Daniel and I had built together. I slipped back into the bathroom and stayed there until my hands stopped shaking. When I finally returned to the reception, I found Daniel chatting with his elderly uncle about new surgical techniques for treating injured wildlife. His face lit up when he saw me and he immediately pulled me into the conversation. "Uncle Harold was just telling me about the pelican they brought in last week," Daniel said, his eyes bright with professional interest. "Ava, you remember that case where the patient came in with similar wing damage?" As I listened to them discuss the intricate details of wildlife rehabilitation, I realized how much Daniel's family misunderstood him. They saw only the successful veterinarian who would inherit family property. They completely missed the man who stayed up all night nursing injured animals back to health, who donated his services to the local wildlife rescue, who chose love over their narrow definition of social status. That night as we drove home, I made a decision that would prove crucial in the months to come. "Daniel," I said carefully, "I overheard your family talking about estate plans tonight." He glanced at me, his expression immediately growing serious. "What did they say?" "They seemed very confident about what happens to our property if something happens to you." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over and took my hand. "Ava, I need to tell you something. I've been putting off some important legal matters, but I think it's time we had a serious conversation about our future." That conversation would change everything. The conversation that night revealed a side of Daniel I had never fully understood. As we sat in our kitchen, he poured himself a glass of bourbon and took a deep breath. "I've known for years how my family feels about you," he began, his voice heavy with sadness. "I kept hoping they would change, that they would see what I see in you. But after tonight I realized they never will." "Daniel, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted gently. "Ava, my family has been planning for your departure since the day we got married. They've convinced themselves that you're temporary, that you'll somehow disappear when it becomes convenient for them." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden we had planted together. "They're operating under some archaic notion that family property automatically reverts to blood relatives when I die. They have no idea how inheritance law actually works, and they've never bothered to ask about my will." My heart began to race. "You have a will?" Daniel turned back to me and I saw something I had never seen before in his eyes. A steely determination that reminded me he was, after all, a Bennett. I've had a will since the week after we got married. But 3 months ago, after that conversation with my cousin about his upcoming wedding, I decided it wasn't comprehensive enough. He walked to his study and returned with a folder thick with legal documents. I've been working with Theodore Warner downtown. Do you remember him? He handled the Johnsons' divorce last year. I nodded, remembering the prominent estate attorney who had helped our neighbors through a complicated property dispute. Theodore helped me understand something important, Daniel continued. My family's assumptions about inheritance aren't just wrong, they're legally meaningless. When we got married, I immediately changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. That means everything automatically becomes yours if I die first. The weight of what he was saying began to sink in. But Daniel, your family doesn't know this. They have no idea. And that's not all. He opened the folder and spread several documents across our kitchen table. I've drafted a comprehensive will that leaves you everything. The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments, everything. More importantly, I've included specific language about why I'm making these decisions. He handed me a letter written in his careful handwriting. As I read it, tears began to fill my eyes. To my family, the letter began. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to protect Ava from your cruelty. For 8 years, I have watched you treat my wife as an outsider, someone unworthy of basic respect, let alone love. You have made it clear that you consider her temporary, a problem to be solved rather than a family member to be cherished. The letter continued for 2 full pages, detailing specific instances of their behavior, their assumptions about property rights, and their casual discussions of Ava's future. Daniel had been paying attention to everything. I had Theodore witness and notarize everything, Daniel explained. I also had him create backup copies to be held at his office. If anything happens to me, he has instructions to contact you immediately. I looked up from the letter, overwhelmed by the thoroughness of his planning. Daniel, this is incredible. But why didn't you tell me sooner? His expression grew sad. Because I hoped I would never need to use it. I kept thinking maybe I could bring them around, maybe I could make them see how wrong they've been. But after listening to them plan your departure like you're some kind of squatter, I realized they'll never change. So what happens now? Daniel reached across the table and took my hands. Now we continue living our lives, loving each other and building our future together. But if something happens to me, you'll be protected. They won't be able to intimidate you or steal what we've built together. 6 weeks later, Daniel was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The diagnosis came after what Daniel thought was just persistent indigestion from too many late-night emergency calls at the clinic. By the time we caught it, the disease had already spread throughout his abdomen. How long? I asked Dr. Phillips, my voice barely a whisper. 6 months, maybe 8 if we're aggressive with treatment, she replied gently. I'm sorry, Ava. I wish I had better news. Daniel took the news with characteristic calm, immediately shifting into planning mode. That evening, as we processed the devastating diagnosis, he called Theodore Warner. Theodore, it's Daniel Bennett. We need to expedite those estate documents we discussed. Yes, it's urgent. Over the next 2 weeks, while Daniel began chemotherapy, we spent our evenings updating and finalizing his will. Theodore came to our house 3 times, bringing additional paperwork and ensuring every detail was properly documented. Daniel, I want to add one more provision, Theodore suggested during his final visit. Given what you've told me about your family's behavior, I recommend including a no-contest clause. If anyone challenges this will, they forfeit any potential inheritance entirely. Do it, Daniel replied without hesitation. I want Ava protected from any legal harassment after I'm gone. As Daniel's condition deteriorated, his family's behavior became even more telling. They visited frequently, but their conversations focused almost entirely on business matters and future plans for the property. I noticed them taking inventory of valuable items, discussing which furniture was original Bennett pieces, and making assumptions about what would happen after Daniel died. Ava dear, Margaret said one afternoon while Daniel was napping, have you given any thought to where you'll live afterward? This is my home, Margaret. I plan to stay here. She exchanged a look with William. Well, of course temporarily. But long-term you'll want to find something more suitable for a single woman. This house is really too large for one person. Plus, the upkeep is expensive, William added. Family property requires family resources to maintain properly. I bit my tongue, remembering Daniel's words about not revealing our legal preparations. But their presumption was infuriating. They were already mentally redistributing our life together, treating me like a temporary caretaker whose services would no longer be needed. The worst conversation happened 2 days before Daniel died. Lawrence and Benjamin came to visit, ostensibly to see their brother, but I overheard them in the hallway making plans. Dad wants to start moving some of the valuable pieces out before the funeral, Lawrence whispered. He's worried Ava might try to claim them. Smart thinking, Benjamin replied. We should probably change the locks too, just to avoid any complications. What about the veterinary practice? Do we need to notify his patients about the transition? Dad's already contacted that new vet in Mount Pleasant. Dr. Ferguson is interested in taking over the client list. I stood frozen outside Daniel's room, listening to them plan the dismantling of our life while my husband lay dying just feet away. They had no idea that every word they spoke was further validating Daniel's decision to protect me legally. That night I told Daniel what I had overheard. He was weak from the pain medication, but his eyes still flashed with anger. They're already dividing up our life? He asked, his voice barely audible. I'm afraid so. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, then looked at me with determination. Ava, promise me something. When they come, and they will come, don't let them intimidate you. You have every legal right to everything we've built together. Theodore has all the documents and he knows exactly what to do. I promise, I whispered, holding his hand. And don't feel guilty about fighting them. They've made their choice about how to treat you. Now they'll live with the consequences. Daniel died on a Tuesday morning in October, surrounded by the golden light filtering through our bedroom windows. I stood in the doorway of my own home, watching William orchestrate the removal of my life with military precision. Lawrence was wrapping my grandmother's china in newspaper while Benjamin loaded Daniel's favorite reading chair onto their truck. You're back sooner than expected, William said when he noticed me, not even having the grace to look embarrassed about being caught looting my house. We thought you might want to stay away for a few more days while we handle the transition. The transition? I asked quietly. Getting the house ready for Lawrence's family. Don't worry, we'll pack your personal items separately. You can pick them up once you've found somewhere else to live. I watched him for a moment, marveling at his absolute certainty. William, I need to tell you something important. What's that, dear? You forgot one crucial thing. His expression shifted slightly. What do you mean? Before I could answer, Theodore Warner's black Mercedes pulled into the driveway. William's face went pale as he recognized the prominent estate attorney stepping out of the car with a briefcase full of legal documents. Mr. Bennett, Theodore called out as he approached the front door. I'm Theodore Warner, Daniel's attorney. I believe we need to have a conversation. I don't understand, William stammered. What's this about? Theodore looked around at the furniture being loaded into trucks, then back at William with professional calm. It's about the fact that you're currently removing property that belongs to Ava Bennett, and you need to stop immediately. Lawrence dropped the box he was carrying. What are you talking about? This is family property. Actually, Theodore replied, opening his briefcase. Legally speaking, everything you've touched today belongs to Ava. Daniel left a comprehensive will and I have the documentation right here. Benjamin stopped loading the truck. A will. But family property always. Family property follows legal ownership, not assumptions, Theodore interrupted. And Daniel made his wishes very clear. Theodore spread the legal documents across our kitchen table while the Bennett men gathered around, their confident expressions rapidly changing to confusion and then anger. This will, dated 6 months ago and properly witnessed, leaves everything to Ava Bennett, Theodore explained methodically. The house, the veterinary practice, all bank accounts, investments and personal property. Everything. William's face turned red. That's impossible. Family property has been passed down for generations. You can't just give it away to outsiders. Mr. Bennett, your son owned this property outright. He could leave it to whomever he chose and he chose his wife. But she's not blood family, Margaret protested. Theodore pulled out another document. Actually, under South Carolina law, spouses have automatic inheritance rights that supersede any family traditions. But more importantly, Daniel also changed all property deeds to joint ownership with right of survivorship. Even without the will, everything would have gone to Ava automatically. Lawrence looked stunned. You mean we have no claim to any of this? None whatsoever. In fact, by removing property without permission, you're technically committing theft. The room fell silent except for the sound of Margaret's sharp breathing. William slumped into a chair, the weight of his miscalculation finally hitting him. There's more, Theodore continued, pulling out Daniel's letter. Daniel also left detailed instructions about why he made these decisions. He began reading aloud. To my family, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here to protect Ava from your cruelty. For 8 years, I have watched you treat my wife as an outsider. As Theodore read Daniel's words, documenting years of subtle and not-so-subtle mistreatment, the Bennett family's faces grew ashen. Daniel had been paying attention to everything, every slight, every dismissive comment, every assumption that Ava was temporary. Furthermore, Theodore continued, Daniel included a no-contest clause. Any attempt to challenge this will result in the forfeiture of any potential inheritance. William finally understood the full scope of his son's final act of protection. Within hours of Theodore's revelation, the Bennett family faced the complete collapse of their assumptions. William was forced to return every item they had removed, including my grandmother's chair that had somehow ended up in Lawrence's van. The locks they had changed were replaced at their expense, and they were banned from entering the property without my explicit permission. The veterinary practice that William had already promised to Dr. Ferguson remained mine to operate or sell as I chose. The family land they had considered their birthright was now permanently outside their control. Their casual planning sessions about my departure became evidence of their complete misunderstanding of both legal reality and Daniel's true feelings about them. Margaret's hopes of maintaining her social standing were shattered when word spread through their social circle about how they had tried to steal from their deceased son's widow. Lawrence's plans to move his family into the family house evaporated, leaving him to explain to his wife and children why their promised new home was no longer available. Benjamin's assumptions about inheriting part of the veterinary practice cost him the job he thought was guaranteed. Most devastatingly for William, the respect he had commanded as the Bennett family patriarch disappeared overnight when people learned how thoroughly his own son had rejected his values and protected his wife from the family's cruelty. The man who had spent decades lecturing others about family loyalty discovered that his son's final act was one of complete rejection of everything William represented. As I stood in my kitchen that evening holding Daniel's letter and surrounded by the belongings his family had tried to steal, I realized that my husband's greatest gift wasn't the house or the money. It was the validation that our love had been real, that I had been worthy of protection, and that sometimes the quietest people fight the hardest battles for those they love. The revenge was complete, not because I had planned it, but because Daniel had seen his family's true nature years before I did, and had quietly, methodically, built walls around our love that they could never breach.